Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to look at one of history's absolute most famous stories, but we're doing it with entirely fresh eyes. I mean, even if you've heard the story of the Prodigal Son a literal 100 times, the historical context and the hidden structural brilliance of this narrative, it's about to blow your mind. Our goal today is to basically strip away centuries of assumptions and look directly at what was actually being said.
Okay, let's dive into this, because that question right there is exactly how we're going to systematically deconstruct this familiar narrative. We naturally focus on the wild, rebellious younger brother, right? I mean, he gets the title track after all. But to truly grasp the weight of this story, we've got to look past him. We really need to see who Jesus was actually talking to and why this specific story was aimed like a laser beam at one very particular group of people.
Section 1. Context. Lost and found. To really get this story, we have to look at who Jesus was actually talking to in Luke chapter 15. On one side, you have the tax collectors and notorious sinners, the total outcasts of society. And on the other side, the grumbling, self-righteous Pharisees and scribes complaining that Jesus is hanging out and eating with these outcasts. Jesus hears them complaining, and well, he responds with an absolute masterclass in storytelling.
He doesn't just tell one story, he actually tells three. Notice the mathematical progression here. It's brilliant. First, a shepherd loses 1 out of 100 sheep. Then, a woman loses 1 out of 10 silver coins. And finally, a father loses 1 out of 2 sons. With each story, the fraction gets smaller, the value of what's lost increases, and the stakes just escalate dramatically. Jesus is establishing this super clear pattern of losing, searching, finding, and celebrating before hitting them with the ultimate reveal.
Moving to part 2, the rebellious younger son. Jesus introduces a man with 2 sons, and the younger one decides to make a move that would have completely shocked a first-century audience. We kind of gloss over it today, but the cultural implications of his dramatic rebellion were absolute dynamite back then.
Now, before we look at what he actually did, let's clarify a really common misconception. The word prodigal doesn't mean lost or wandering. Actually, it literally means wastefully extravagant. As you'll see, the younger son recklessly wastes his wealth, but keep this definition in the back of your mind because he definitely isn't the only one in the story who is beautifully, shockingly extravagant.
So here's the inciting incident. The younger son demands his inheritance early. In the honor and shame society of the ancient Middle East, asking for an inheritance while your father was still alive and perfectly healthy was essentially looking him right in the eye and saying, "I wish you were dead. I want your things, but I don't want you." It was the ultimate disrespect. It brought massive, unimaginable public shame to the father and the whole family.
Crazy enough, the father miraculously grants the request, and the son's downward spiral instantly begins. He travels to a distant country, blows every last cent on wild living, terrible financial planning, by the way, and hits rock bottom when a severe famine strikes. To survive, he literally takes a job feeding pigs. For a Jewish boy in the 1st century, dealing with unclean swine was the ultimate, detestable low. At this point, he has completely severed himself from his family, his faith, and his entire identity.
Part 3, the father's radical grace. Starving and desperate, the son decides to go home, hoping just to be hired as a servant. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the focus of the story is about to completely shift from the rebellion of the son to the culturally shocking reaction of the father.
I mean, the father had every right to turn him away or demand some kind of public penance. Instead, look at this sequence. He sees his son from a distance, meaning he was already out looking for him. He feels compassion, and then, astonishingly, he runs. In that culture, an elderly patriarch in flowing robes simply did not run. No way. It was considered entirely undignified. He literally had to hike up his robes, exposing his legs, to sprint toward the boy who shamed him, throwing his arms around him and kissing him over and over again.
The son tries to deliver this transactional, rehearsed apology. He wants to earn his way back by becoming a hired hand. But look at the contrast here. The father's extravagant grace completely interrupts reality. He doesn't even let the son finish his speech. He ignores the transactional offer entirely and immediately starts issuing commands to his servants to restore the boy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the depth of that restoration. Every single item the father gives has a super profound symbolic meaning. The best robe restores his honor and covers his filthy rags. The signet ring reinstates his authority and his identity as a true son. The sandals represent freedom because, hired servants and slaves went barefoot. And the fatted calf? That means a massive, joyous celebration for the entire village.
The father declares he was lost and is found. He doesn't put the son on probation. He doesn't merely tolerate this returning sinner. He joyously and immediately restores him as a full, honored member of the household. Remember that definition. The father is the truly prodigal one here, wastefully extravagant with his incredible mercy and love.
Section 4. The resentful older brother. You see, the story doesn't end with the party. We now reach the ultimate twist. Remember those grumbling Pharisees from earlier? Well, Jesus brings in a character perfectly designed to hold a mirror right up to them. Hearing the music and dancing, the older brother finds out what happened and becomes absolutely furious. He flat out refuses to go inside. When the father comes out to him, listen to the older brother's bitter response. "These many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment." He views his relationship with his father purely as a transaction. He sees his obedience as a way to earn a reward, not as a loving family bond at all. Look at the older brother's hidden lostness, totally exposed through his actions. He publicly embarrasses his father by refusing to go into the feast. He doesn't even address him as father. He accuses him of being a stingy slave driver, and he entirely disowns his own sibling, literally calling him "this son of yours." The older brother proved that he had emotionally journeyed to a distant, bitter country without ever actually leaving the farm.
When we compare them side by side, the absolute genius of the story is revealed. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. One was lost in a distant land. The other was lost right at home. One showed blatant, messy rebellion. The other showed cold, legalistic self-righteousness. But neither truly knew the father's heart. Both viewed him as a boss to appease rather than a father to love. Basically, one was lost outside the house by breaking the rules, and the other was lost inside the house by keeping them. And both had an absolute need for grace.
But just as the father's grace was radical for the younger son, it is equally radical for the older one. The father actually leaves the party. He goes outside, enduring public humiliation a second time, to tenderly plead with his self-righteous older son. He calls him son and reminds him that everything he has is already his. The father's love extends equally to the rebellious rule breaker and the resentful rule keeper.
And that brings us to Section 5. Which son are you? As we wrap up, Jesus turns this ancient story into a direct challenge, basically forcing us to examine our own worldview and our own hearts.
So the crucial point is how the master storyteller ends it. He stops abruptly. It's an unresolved cliffhanger. We never find out if the older brother drops his pride and goes inside to join the feast, or if he stays out in the dark, clutching his own bitter self-righteousness. Jesus deliberately leaves that tension hanging in the air for the Pharisees and, well, for us.
Because ultimately, the pen is handed right to the listener. The feast is happening. The father is pleading. And the final question remains, will you accept the father's extravagant grace, or will you stay outside holding on to your own righteousness? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and definitely keep exploring.